Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're starting to get to the really exciting parts of the STEM problem-solving process. Usually this ends up being most people's favorite type of parts when they actually get to build stuff. So I hope you're looking forward to that part, to that process. So let's kind of take a look back at where we've been so far. So we determined what the problem is that we want to solve. We figured out what are the needs and wants in order to solve that problem. We generated all kinds of different ideas. We drew thumbnail sketches and labeled them and talked about them and talked with other people. We have a whole bunch, at least 5, like more than 5, all kinds of different ideas on how to solve our problem. We have also then developed those ideas further. We drew bigger sketches. We did a storyboard. So there's all kinds of different things that we did here to extend those ideas further to see if they're realistic or not. We determined maybe what materials we think would make sense to use, those types of things. And now at this point, we're probably not quite ready. We probably have an idea what we want to do and we want to maybe try it, but we're not quite ready to like actually make it out of real materials like wood and so on. And we're not quite ready to make like an official blueprint. Now I just want to show you real quick. Here's an example of an official blueprint. This product is an example of like something like a stand that would sit on top of a desk, and then your laptop or Chromebook could sit on it, so it's at like a nice angle, and then there's some storage in there and so on. So this would be an example of an official blueprint. By the student creating this blueprint, they could then make this out of actual wood. So this has the actual dimensions. It shows all the parts. There's some cuts in here for plexiglass to go on. If we go here, this is the same product, but now this is like showing us every single piece, the dimensions of every single piece this product is made out of, and so on. Most of us are not going to be ready at this point to do this exactly. We might not know the size that we need. We might not know how many pieces we need. We might not know the angle we want our product at. That is okay. So the purpose of the proof of concept step. So what this student did is even before they made this on the computer with a 3D model, before they made this blueprint, they made this out of foam or cardboard. They had the idea in their head. They made it out of foam or cardboard to get the general size that they wanted and layout. They actually set their laptop on top of it, and that helped them figure out how many pieces are they going to use, what angles is it going to be at, what size are they thinking, and so on. So they made like a rough model. They made a proof of concept to see if their idea would work. So the proof of concept really helped this student figure out the overall general size and layout of what they were trying to do. Let me give you another example. We had a student that was making a skateboard, and then instead of making it out of wood right away, and the reason why, so it's like you may think like, oh, why, Mr. Grouper? I know what I want to do. Just give me some wood. Let me start cutting stuff. I want to get in this. So I of course appreciate that motivation, but usually when people want to do that, they just want to jump in and start cutting wood and that kind of stuff. Is they usually mess up pretty often. Get mess up and waste material, and then also waste time. So the reason why we're not just handing you wood so you can start cutting it and do what you think you need to do is because that's going to waste time and money. So what this person did, instead of making their wood first for their skateboard, is they actually made it on a piece of paper. So they made a template on a piece of paper, a big, just kind of big template, and then they kind of got that, their size-wise of what they're thinking. They actually stood on the paper, like put the paper on the floor and stood on it, and kind of like, okay, and they made it a little bit bigger, extended it, and then they put that piece of paper on a foam, traced it, and then they made their like curved tail section and so on. Then they attached their wheels to it. So like what this student did is they made a model, they made a proof of concept of their idea just to kind of make sure the size and everything is what they're looking for. And then now that they've made this, they have a very, very, very clear idea of what they are going to be cutting and making out of the wood. So what they actually did is they ended up tracing this exact product on the actual wood. Here's another example of a proof of concept. Again, we're testing to see if our idea in general works. So this student is taking on the mailbox problem, and what she did is we didn't start with a big full mailbox and test idea on there and drill holes in the mailbox and mess stuff up. No, is that she had like a little mini mailbox, and she just used simple cheap materials. We got rubber band, we got tape, we got paper, those types of things. Just using simple materials to see if the general idea works. Very quick, very rough, but it helps us figure out if the idea works. So she can actually open this up, and then if her flag pops up or whatever, it helps give her a better idea of what adjustments is she going to have to make when she makes this for real. When we make our proof of concept, we want to use inexpensive materials and materials that are quick to set up. So for example, like using like hot glue and cardboard, like that's very, very quick. Hot glue doesn't cost us very much. We're not going to waste it on purpose, but in general, we can use a good amount of it. It's quick. And then same thing with like cardboard. Like cardboard, it doesn't cost us anything if we're taking it from boxes that already exist. Tape is relatively inexpensive, so we can use that as well. So your job is going to be to figure out what materials are going to make sense for you to use to make a model of your idea or of your concept, but to make it good enough that you can test it and see if your general idea works, if your concept is going to work, or to give you a general idea on the size. So here's some examples of other materials. So like we said, cardboard sheets, cardboard rolls are good. Other types of adhesive, we already mentioned hot glue. We have all kinds of different types of tape. Paper in general is a good thing to use. Legos are great because those are reusable and you can kind of move them around. You don't have to worry about gluing anything, that kind of stuff. So it's nice to kind of get a general size of what we're looking for. Reusable clay or Play-Doh, something like that. Now we say reusable clay because we don't really want to use clay that is not reusable or clay that's going to like dry out by air or something like that, because then we can't reuse it. But clay like that dries out or that we would fire, that's something we could use more so for our final product. But we'd want to use reusable clay, like that clay that doesn't really dry out. I think it's oil based. Foam board can be okay. It depends on what we're making. We definitely should have dimensions of what we're making if we're going to use a lot of foam board, but we do have some like scrap pieces of foam board. Dowels, those are overall relatively inexpensive, so using those and so on. And then we'll also have a box of like scrap wood, foam, and plastic, and some of those things too. So these are examples of things that we could use to make our proof of concept. This is what the storage room looks like right now, the supplies room. All kinds of different bins full of all kinds of different things. So we're going to use this, so that list that we just looked at, you're going to be thinking what do you want to use off of there, and then depending on what you're doing, there's of course some different and other supplies in here that we can use for our proof of concept, and definitely a lot of these are supplies that we can use for our actual product. So your job right now is to think about what would actually be best for, I got a couple different products here. What do you think would be the best route? So maybe materials to make it out of, make a full-size model, mini model for some of these products. So for example, for the doggy stairs, if you were to make a proof of concept or a model or something of this, well, like what do you think what would you use? So based off of those materials that I had listed earlier, what would you use for materials? Would you make a full-scale model or would you make a smaller scale model? What do you think would make sense? Here's what I would say. For the doggy stairs, if we want to make a full-size model, then what we should really be using would be cardboard, because that's relatively inexpensive. It can give us the overall size. So if the purpose of us making our proof of concept is to get the size, then we'd want to use cardboard. Now, next product, think about the book holder. So if our idea is we want to make a book holder, we're trying to solve the problem of being able to read a book more easily. So what materials would you make this stand out of to like test out, to figure out the size that we want, to then put the book on there and just see if the general size is what we want, or the angle, or our mechanism to stop the pages and so on? What do you think would be good materials to use to make this out of for a proof of concept? So what I'd say is, because this is smaller, it'd be okay to use some of our foam pieces and so on. So we could definitely use like some foam, and then the bottom part would probably be foam too. All kinds of different things these mechanisms could be worked out of. Even like use like a rubber band or something like that. So there's all kinds of different ideas what we can make this out of. And I want you to think there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer for some of this. Just different ideas. Some ideas quicker than others or less expensive than others. Here's another one for you. Let's say you're making a cute cell phone holder, and maybe it's like an animal like Pikachu, or I don't know, something like that. Some kind of animal that's holding onto the cell phone. What would you make this out of then? This one's a little bit more tricky. What would you make a cell phone holder for your proof of concept? What would you make the cell phone holder out of? So my recommendation for something like this, something that would work nicely, would be like that reusable clay, because this is very kind of round shapes. So these round shapes are pretty tough to get with Legos or foam, or like foam board or something like that. So if we use just that like clay, that would work really nicely. Now, another example for you. Let's say you're making a soccer ball collector and shooter. Now, I want you to think about this. This is a pretty complex problem. There's a lot of different parts to it. I want you to think about what would you do to make a proof of concept of this? Now, this one's a little tricky. So what I would say is we'd want to test a couple different things. So if your problem is more complicated, let's break up those sub-problems. Let's test one concept of an idea at a time. So what this student can do is, instead of testing the ball collector with the shooter, is maybe they just design some sort of shooter. They make a proof of concept for just the shooting part of it. So if it's two like wheels spinning really fast and that shoots the ball out or something like that, maybe they just make a model of that. And then maybe they have a couple different ideas on how they're going to collect the ball. So maybe one's a big net, maybe one's a big basket like this. Maybe they make a small scale version of each one or something like that. And then maybe eventually then they combine the two together in their model. But the point is that like for some of these more complicated problems, when you do a proof of concept, you might only test one of the sub problems of your big problem. An assignment that needs to be completed before you can proceed to making a proof of concept is this proof of concept assignment. So there's some stuff here to read. We go down, some more stuff to read. We got to have all these items done. So we really got to have a whole bunch of ideas generated and ideas developed and be caught up on all of these things before we can proceed to this step. And then there's an important question to explain here. So you're going to read this. And one thing to really, you have to be able to answer this is, how is you making your proof of concept necessary and important to you doing this project? Because depending on what you're doing, it might not be necessary to make a proof of concept. It might not. So this question needs to be explained with multiple sentences. Why is it necessary for you to make a proof of concept for your project? And then also down here, so you're going to read this and explain this as well. This is like saying, what is your plan? So what is your plan for your proof of concept? What are you going to make it out of? What materials are you using for each part? How are you going to test it? How are you going to know if your concept works? What's the big deal here? What are you testing with your proof of concept? As a side note, if you are doing programming, like some sort of programmer or electronics proof of concept, we'll just be kind of hooking up and trying some of the electronic type things. And then a proof of concept for programming itself will be, you might make like a flow chart, something like that. So you might not actually be doing the coding yet. So for the program, it would be more so like a flow chart in terms of how the product's going to be used and so on and what that looks like. So thanks for checking this out.